Hey everybody, it's Kyla at the MJC again, and I'm here today to finish up our walkthrough of the modification motion with the last two sections that are in this document. But before we get started, I want to remind you guys, as always, that nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice. It's obviously a video, so we're not able to analyze your specific situation. I can't tell you whether a modification is the right form for you to fill out, whether a court is going to grant you whatever you're asking for in your modification, and I can't tell you whether or not what you're asking for is in your best interest. So if you have those sorts of questions, we would always recommend getting some legal advice. Here in Milwaukee, you can get brief legal advice at the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinics for free. If you aren't located in Milwaukee, then we would recommend talking to your local clerk of court to find out what sort of resources are available for pro se litigants, people representing themselves in your county. All right, so let's hop into the form. As I mentioned in the last video I was doing, at the very bottom of the second page, there's a line that wants to know the date of your last court order about whatever it is you want to change. So if in ours, as you know, John and Jane, our sample couple, have changed a whole bunch of things, or John has asked to change a whole bunch of things, because of course Jane wouldn't have to sign off on this form. So we're going to put the date of that last order. And it's just whatever date that would be. So in our case, theirs was back in 2018. If you have multiple orders, so for most people, whatever you're wanting to change will all come out of the same order. But for some people, you might have one order that changes child support and, say, a later one that changes placement. And you can list both of those. We could do this one, 19, and that would be placement. Just make sure you indicate sort of which order applies to which section. But again, for most people, that most recent order is going to be just one date. And you're just going to put the date on the order that you've been working from. And then this last section, section 3, is what we call the substantial change section. So what this section wants to know is what has changed, what substantial, so what major change has happened since the time the last court order was made. Because obviously when the last order was made, a court thought it was a good order. So what has changed? What is different in your life or in your ex's life or whatever that's making this order not work anymore? And you can see we've got a few sections you can choose. If a child who used to live with the other parent now lives with you, you'd check A. If one of your children is over 18 now, or if they're 18 years old and out of high school, B. C is just going to be if somebody has moved, if you have moved or your ex has moved, or if somebody is planning to move, you can also check C. D would be if when your last order happened, you and the other person were living together, but you aren't living together anymore. E is the one you're going to check if your current order doesn't have a set placement schedule and you and the other person aren't able to agree to one anymore. So if your order says something like placement with one party, reasonable times, reasonable notice, or placement with one party held open, then you would probably be an E here. And obviously, presumably, if you're filling out this form, one of the things that's happening is that you and the other person are no longer able to come to an agreement about when it is you should see your child and those sorts of things. F and G tend to go together. F is what you will put if somebody's employment has changed. So if their job has changed or if their work shift has changed. So if you changed companies, you used to work for Apple and now you're working for Amazon, that would be here. It would also happen if your work shift changed. Maybe you used to work graveyard and now you're working days. That could happen there. So if you're in that one, you just check that and you're going to fill in the name of the person whose work has changed. If both people have changed, so if in our situation both John and Jane have new jobs or new employment or work shifts, then we would check both parties. And similarly, G is about income. So if in this situation, if John maybe changed his job and he makes more or less money, then we could put that here. And just like the one above it, if both parties' income has changed, so both parties make different amounts of money, it could be here as well. H is the one you're going to pick if the availability or cost of health insurance has changed. So Maybe you had health insurance available before through your job and you don't anymore. Maybe the cost of it has gone up. Your employer changed, providers and it costs more money. All those sorts of health insurance things under H. I will only come up in divorce cases. That's the one you'll check if maintenance, that spousal support, if the person who was supposed to be paid that has remarried. So the person who was supposed to receive maintenance has remarried. Other is where you can put anything that doesn't fit into those categories. So if there's something going on in your situation that doesn't, that doesn't fit neatly into these boxes, you'd put it under other. And you can check as many of these as apply. So, if maybe one of their children turned 18 and somebody's moved, and you can check as many as apply to your situation. But do make sure you'll want to check at least one. So if you don't check any of those, then just check J and explain what has happened in your situation. So what is making you want to change this order now? And then last but not least, there is also this couple of lines to explain in more detail what's going on. So for example, if up here, John and Jane just checked that employment and income has changed, and let's even just say it's just John's that's changed, that in and of itself doesn't tell the whole story. Because, if we say his income's changed, John could make a lot more money. And so here's where we can just give more detail about what's going on. And you'll just write what's happening. So if John were writing this, he might say, I used to work for Amazon and I made, say, $20 an hour. But now I am working for Apple and only make $16 an hour. And you can include, again, multiple things here. So, if D and E applied, we could explain down here as well, if I see if I can get in the right box. Jane and I used to agree for me to see Sally on Saturdays, but now, she won't let me see Sally at all. Or whatever is going on in your situation. Obviously, this is just a little example I wrote up, sort of guessing what John's situation could be, but you should write in this line whatever your situation is. If what you have to say here doesn't fit in the 2 or 3 lines that are available, then you can mark the See Attached box and you can write sort of a longer description. But keep in mind that See Attached is mostly just an expansion of this section. Some people will use that to attach a bunch of evidence and things, and it's possible that the court in your county won't accept it with all those evidentiary things attached. So what we typically recommend is just filling this out to answer the question it asked, what has changed, not including sort of lots of additional information. And then that is all for that form. You will fill out down here at the bottom the signature block. It asks for a lot of information from you. So in our situation, John Smith would put his name here. He would put his address here. I think he was on South Street. And you'll put the city, state if you can fit it. You'll put an email address. If you don't have an email address, then just go ahead and leave that blank. And you'll put a good phone number for you. Oh, John's was 262, wasn't it? And then you'll put the date. And then here, you won't need to put a state bar number unless you are an attorney. So if there are any lawyers out here watching this, then you'll put your state bar number. But for most people, you won't have a state bar number. And so you can just leave that line blank. Then when you print this form off, you'll sign there, and that will be all for filling it out. All right, well, that is it for the modification form. Thank you guys, as always, for listening to this video. I hope that it was helpful. If you still have questions, feel free to visit us at the Milwaukee Justice Center, located in room G9 of the Milwaukee County Courthouse. All right, that's all from the MJC. Thanks again for listening. Now go out and represent yourselves well.